So good day. Um, for today's video, I'm gonna talk about the module 3 for the month of May. And my name is Daniela General C. Zosa, and this is for the subject of CA 200 Institutional Corrections. So our topic for today is the institutional agencies of the Philippines, specifically the Bureau of Corrections. Then we're gonna tackle about the Code of Calintiao, and then the 7 institutional corrections of the Philippines, which are the New Bilibid Prison or NBP, then the San Ramon Prison and Penal Farm, then Iwahig Penal Colony, then Correctional Institute for Women or CIW, then the Davao Penal Colony, Sablayan Penal Farm, and Leyte Regional Prison, and the Provincial Jail System, and lastly, but not the least, is the Public Attorney's Office or PAO. First is the institutional agencies of the Philippines. So, Bureau of Corrections. So, the Bureau of Corrections in Tagalog or Filipino, kawanihan ng mga bilangguan. So, this literal means Bureau of Corrections, Bureau of Prisons, which was the old name of the agency from 1905 to 1989. So, abbreviated by Bucor. So, it is an agency of the Department of Justice, which is charged with the custody and rehabilitation of national offenders. So these national offenders are who were or who are have been sentenced to 3 years of imprisonment or more. So kani sila mo ni sila ang mga offenders that are sentenced by the court 3 years imprisonment. So the Bucor is the one that will deal with these offenders. Organization. It is headed by a director general with the rank of undersecretary, equivalent to the 4-star general in the military. And the Bureau has 2,862 employees, 61% of whom are custodial or correctional officers. The 33% are administrative personnel, and the remaining 6% are members of the medical staff. So mostly of their employees are custodial or correctional officers. So their mission is to maximize the assets value of the Bucor to effectively pursue its responsibility in safely securing, transforming national prisoners through responsive rehabilitation program. So they have this responsibility to transform the national prisoners to be responsive rehabilitation programs. So their main goal is to rehabilitate the national prisoners. So this is managed by professional correctional officers. Their mandate is the principal task of the Bureau of Correction is rehabilitation of national prisoners. So as I mentioned before, it's their task to rehabilitate the national prisoners. The Bureau carries out the following tasks to carry out its mandate. So, confine persons convicted by the courts to serve a sentence in national prison. So, when we say national prison, they're talking about the 7 operating units. So, the New Bilibid Prison, San Ramon, then keep prisoners from committing crimes while in custody. So while the prisoners or the national offenders are inside the prisons, their mandate is to keep the prisoners from committing crimes inside. So drug paraphernalia, and others that are prohibited are strictly uh, strictly monitor. So provide humane treatment by supplying the inmates' basic needs. So water, food. So they're the ones to supply these basic needs by the inmates, and implementing a variety of rehabilitation program designed to change their patterns of criminal. So there is counseling and assistance or antisocial behavior. So they have the programs to counsel these prisoners so that they can break the pattern of their criminality. So engage in agro-industrial projects for the purpose of developing prison lands. So for example, Iwahig Prison and Penal Farm, and resources into productive bases or profit centers. So they can also earn money from these lands that they are transforming into an agro-industrial. Uh, so developing and employing inmate manpower skills and labor. So the inmates are trained, and they are trained uh, to master their skills in being a productive persons inside the prison. So providing prisoners with a source of income so they can also earn money even though they are inside the prison, they will be able to earn money from this, and augmenting the Bureau's yearly appropriations. So the Bucor logo. So the Bucor logo is the logo of Bureau of Corrections represents the government agency's mandate. So the rehabilitation of inmate. So the logo focuses on the man in prison. So which is, as we can see here, there is a silhouette of a man. So the man in prison as the main concern of rehabilitation. So it represents man behind bars. So this the black lines represent the bars, but who looks outwards with the hope of rejoining the free community. So the man in this logo is looking outside, outwards to the community. And then the bar of justice represents the justice system. So we have the 7 rays of sun, which represents the 7 institutional corrections. Then the color green symbolizes hope, and then the color orange is symbolic of happiness. So the capital punishment. So the male inmates condemned to death were held at New Bilibid prison, and female inmates condemned to death were held at the Correctional Institution for Women. So the females are in CIW while the males are in the New Bilibid prison. So the death chamber for inmates to be electrocuted was in Building 414 within the maximum security compound of New Bilibid. So they also have a lethal injection chamber for death penalty. So history of the Bureau of Correction. So pre-colonial Philippines. So correction in the Philippines started during pre-colonial times. So it was, however, organized on individual community basis. So before the arrival of the Spanish people, they already have their own laws, own local chieftain to resolve disputes within the community, and then they also have penalty to these behaviors or acts. So under Spanish rule, so the Spanish colonial government introduced a formal prison and policing system to the Philippines in the 19th century. So they have introduced formal prisons system beside from the pre-colonial Philippines. So Ilahon is mas formal Ilahon kaysa pre-colonial system. So, but why prisons and why in the 19th century and not earlier? So, historian Greg Bankoff writes that the Spanish colonial government turned to imprisonment as a final effort to remain in control. So, this talk about the influence of the church, since the church cannot control the Filipino people anymore. So the Spanish final effort is to resort into imprisonment. So the main penitentiary was the old beloved prison in Orequeta Street, Manila, which was established in 1847 pursuant to Section 1708 of the Revised Administrative Code. So it was formally opened by by a royal decree in 1865. So Old Bilibid Prison was created by a royal decree in 1865. So this is the picture of the Old Bilibid Prison. So it was believed to be one of the largest prisons in the entire world with over 1,000 beds. So dagan kaayo ang ma-accommodate ani na mga offenders or mga prisoners. Then so the Spanish also opened or built several other penal institutions under the uh, new colonial prison system. So aside from Old Bilibid Prison, they also built other penal institutions. August 21, 1869, the San Ramon Prison and Penal Farm in Zamboanga City was established to confine Muslim rebels. So as I mentioned, the Spanish also opened or built other penal institutions such as Zamboanga City, which accommodate or will confine the Muslim rebels and recalcitrant political prisoners opposed to the Spanish rule. So mostly in in San Ramon prison, mostly of their prisoners are political prisoners who oppose the Spanish rule. So under the American rule, so when Americans took over the country, they too sought to control the Filipinos. So after the defeat of the Spanish, the Americans also sought to control the Filipinos, having inherited the prison infrastructure from the Spanish. The American colonial administration established the Bureau of Corrections in 1901. So the Bureau of Prisons was created under the Reorganization Act of 1905, Act number 1407 dated November 1, 1905. So as an agency under the Department of Commerce and Police. So this is under the American rule. So on January 1, 1915, the San Ramon Prison was placed under the auspice of the Bureau of Prisons. So this is the old name of the Bureau of Corrections. And started receiving prisoners from Mindanao. So San Ramon Prison accommodates prisoners from Mindanao. So before the reconstruction of San Ramon Prison, the Americans established in 1904 the Inuit Penal Settlement. So it is now called Iwahig Prison and Penal Farm, and a vast reservation of 28,072 hectares. So it is a big land for Iwahig Prison and Penal Farm. So other penal colonies were established during the American regime. On November 27, 1929, the Correctional Institution for Women was created under Act number 3579. So the the creation of CIW is still under the American rule. So while Davao Penal Colony in southern Mindanao was opened in 1932 under Act number 3732. So this is the new Bilibid prison. So to the increasing number of committals to the old Bilibid prison in Manila, the new Bilibid prison was established in 1935 in a southern suburb of Muntinlupa, Rizal. So they also created new Bilibid prison to decongest the increasing numbers of prisoners in the old Bilibid prison. After American regime, two more penal institutions were established. These were the Sablayan Prison and Penal Farm in Occidental Mindoro under Proclamation number 72 issued on September 26, 1954, and later Regional Prison under Proclamation number 1101 issued on January 16, 1973. So the Bureau of Prisons was renamed Bureau of Corrections under the new Administrative Code of 1987, issued on November 23, 1987. So this is after the American rule. They replaced the old name of Bureau of Prison to Bureau of Corrections, and Proclamation number 495 of the President. So Code of Calintiao. So Code of Calintiao are authored by Dato Calintiao. So listed 18 orders for the proper punishment of certain morals and social transgressions. So in 1433, the first Filipino lawmaker purportedly wrote Code of Calintiao on the island of Panay. So to this document, we were introduced to some of the most absurd and bizarre laws ever written. So ang ilang mga laws na nasa Code of Calintiao is very bizarre and absurd. So, depending on the gravity of the offense, punishment ranged from a light fine to being cut to pieces and thrown to alligators. Muna ang mga penalties sa Code of Calintiao. So, Code of Calintiao had been an important part of history until its authenticity was finally put into a question. So, the historians or authority finally had the question is its authenticity. So no historical evidence, not even a trace of oral history in Aklan has ever been found to prove its existence. So what is Code of Calintiao? So finally, historian William Henry Scott was able to identify the person behind the falsehood. So they examined the Code of Calintiao and then found out that there's no such thing as Code of Calintiao written by Datu Calintiao. So the person is Jose E. Marcos. The Code of Calintiao, as it turned out, was a fabricated myth. So it is a myth which is written by Jose E. Marco, submitted by Marco to the Philippine Library in 1914. In the end, the National Historical Institute officially declared it a hoax, or dili tinuod in 2004, but some still are believe that it is real. So these are the articles of Code of Calintiao. So the first article is, you shall not kill, neither shall you steal. So you are not to kill or to steal. Neither shall you do harm to the aged, lest you incur the danger of death. All those who infringe these orders shall be condemned to death by being drowned in the river or in boiling water. So if you are caught killing or stealing or harming the aged, then your penalty or punishment shall be death by being drowned in the river or in a boiling water. Then article number 2 is, you shall obey, let all your debts with the headman be met punctually. So you must pay your debts on time. He who does not obey shall receive for the first time 100 lashes. So if the debt is large, he shall be condemned to thrust his hand in boiling water thrice. For the second time, he shall be beaten to death. So if you have heavier debts, then you will be beaten to death. Obey you. Let no one have women that are very young, nor more than he can support, nor be given to excessive lust. He who does not comply with, obey, and observe this order shall be condemned to swim for 3 hours for the first time, and for the second time to be beaten to death with sharp thorns. So, first time offender will the punishment will be to swim for 3 hours, and the second time will be beaten to death with sharp thorns. Article 4 is to observe and obey. Let no one disturb the quiet of the graves. When passing by the caves and trees where they are, give respect to them. So he who does not observe they shall be killed by ants or beaten to death with thorns. So I cannot imagine disobeying this rule and be killed by ants. So my question is, how are they gonna do that to kill a person by ants or by with thorns? Then article 5 is, you shall obey he who exchanges food, let it be always done in accordance with his word. He who does not comply shall be beaten for 1 hour. He who repeats the offense shall be exposed for 1 day among the ants. So he will be spending uh spending his time with the ants if he disobeyed this rule. So article 6 is, you shall be obliged to revere rights sites that are held in respect, such as those of trees of recognized worth or other sites. He who fails to comply shall pay with 1 month's work in gold or in honey. So honey is also a form of payment. So article 7, this shall be put to death. He who kills trees of venerable appearance, who shoot arrows at night at old men and women, he who enters the houses of the headman without permission, he who kills a shark or a strict caiman. So caiman is an alligator. So slavery for a dome, a certain period of time, shall be suffered by these who steal away the women of the headman, by him who keep ill-tempered dogs that bite the headman, by him who burns the fields of another. So Article 9 is, all this shall be beaten for 2 days who sing while traveling by night. So if magsaba-saba ka gabi, magkanta-kanta ka, then you will be beaten for 2 days mo na ang punishment. Kill the manual, tear the documents, belonging to the headman. So, are malicious liars or who mock the dead. So, if magmock ka sa dead, then you will be beaten for 2 days. So, Article 10. It is decreed an obligation that every mother teach secretly to her daughters matters pertaining to laws and prepare them for womanhood. So let not man be cruel nor punish their women when they catch them in the act of adultery. Adultery is when you're married and then you have sexual activities with another man that is not your husband. So that is adultery. Whoever shall disobey shall be killed by being cut to pieces and thrown to the cayman. So this is what I mentioned before, the bizarre punishment of Code of Calintiao. So kung kinsa ang mo disobey ani nga rule will be cut to pieces and then throw to the caveman. So basically you are being fed to the alligators. So Article 11. These shall be burned who by their strength or cunning have mocked at and escaped punishment, or who have killed young boys, or tried to steal away the women of the elders. Then Article 12 is these shall be drowned. So kani sila mo'y ma-drowned. All who interfere with their superiors or their own owners or masters. All those who abuse themselves through their lust. Those who destroy their anitus, or anitus are the gods of the uh, Filipino people before. By breaking them or throwing them down. So all this shall be exposed to ants for half a day. So this is one of the bizarre punishment of Code of Calintiao, being exposed to the ants for half a day. Who kill black cats during a new moon? So you are not allowed to kill black cats during a new moon, or steal anything from the chiefs or agurangs, however small the object may be. So if you are caught um, stealing anything, even though it's just the smallest object, then you are to be exposed to ants for half a day. This shall be made slave for life. So this is slavery. This punishment is slavery for the rest of your life. Who have beautiful daughters and deny them to the sons of chiefs. So if you have a daughter that is beautiful, then you reject the deny them to the sons of chief. If dili nimo ipamarry or ang imong anak sa mga sons sa chief, then you are gonna be slave for life. And with bad faith hide them away. Muna kanang imong taguon imong mga gwapa nga anak, then this will be your punishment, which is slavery for life. Then Article 15. Concerning beliefs and superstitions, they shall be beaten. Who eat the diseased flesh of beasts, which they hold in respect, or the herb which they consider good. Who wound or kill the young of the manual or the white monkey. Article 16. The fingers shall be cut off. So if you disobey this article, your fingers will pay the price. So it will be cut off. Of all those who break idols of wood and clay in their alangans and temples. So if you break the anitos, which is their idols, then your fingers will be cut off. Of those who destroy the daggers of the Tagalons or break the drinking jar of the latter. So these are mga holy objects. If you break anything or destroy them accidentally, then the punishment will be your cutting of the fingers. So your fingers will be cut off. So Article 17. They shall be killed. So who profane sites where idols are kept and sites where are buried the sacred things of these diwata of their diwatas and headman. Who he who perform his necessities in those places shall be burned. So kaning mga in aning nga lugar, it's prohibit to be kanang manghihi ka, malibang ka dito sa ilang mga holy places, then dili na siya pwede. Then Article 18. Those who do not cause these rules to be obeyed, if they are headmen, they shall be put to death by being stoned and crushed. And if they are agorangs, they shall be placed in rivers to be eaten by sharks and caimans. So, an important note to the Code of Calintiao is in the famous epic story of Maragtas, there was this mythical legal code called the Code of Calintiao. It was named after its supposed author, so Dato Calintiao. So he's the one that authored the Code of Calintiao, who allegedly wrote it in 1433. So Dato Calintiao was a chief on the island of Negros, but it was written about by Jose E. Marco. So the original author is Jose E. Marco in 1913 in his historical fiction Las Antiguas Leyendas de la Isla de Negros, the ancient legends of the island of Negros. So the Code of Calintiao is an epic story of Maragtas, which is authored by Jose. So the New Bilibid Prison. So kaning New Bilibid Prison is one of the 7 institutional corrections in the Philippines. So first is the New Bilibid Prison in Muntinlupa, Metro Manila, is the main insular penitentiary designed to house the prison population of the Philippines. So this is the main. So as of May 2018, the New Bilibid Prison housed 26,877 convicted criminals. So daghan gyud kayong ma-accommodate sa New Bilibid Prison nga mga criminals. So it was established in 1935. So in 1940, prisoners were transferred to the New Bilibid Prison from the Old Bilibid Prison, since Old Bilibid Prison there's a lot of convicted criminals there, so they transferred the criminals to the New Bilibid Prison, also known as Cárcel y Presidio Correccional, so Spanish for correctional jail in military prison. So the penitentiary had an initial land area of 551 hectares or 1,360 acres, but 104 hectares were transferred to a housing project of the Department of Justice. So from 551 hectares, it was cut or cut to the 104 hectares were transferred for a housing project of the Department of Justice. So during the Japanese occupation of the Philippines during World War, Bilibid was a prisoner of war, and civilian internee camp where American soldiers and civilians were held by the Japanese. So the prison was used by the Japanese to be dira nila ipamutang ang mga prisoners of war. So the old prison was established by the Spanish colonial government on June 25, 1865 via royal decree. It is divided into two sections. So, ang New Bilibid, ang prison is uh, divided into two sections, which is the carcel, which could accommodate 600 inmates, and then the presidio, which could hold 527 prisoners. So this is the picture of the New Bilibid prison. Ay. So the remnants of the old facility was used by the city of Manila as its detention center, known today as Manila City Jail. So the old Bilibid prison was used as a Manila City Jail now. So San Ramon Prison and Penal Farm. So this is the number 2 of the 7 institutional correction, which is San Ramon Prison and Penal Farm. So according to historical accounts, the San Ramon Prison was established in southern Zamboanga on August 21, 1870 through a royal decree promulgated in 1869. So this is still under the Spanish rule. So still created through a royal decree. Considered the oldest penal facility in the country. Prisoners in San Ramon were required to do agricultural work. So, as the namesake, penal farm. So they are they have programs there such as farming, fishing. So during the Spanish-American War in 1898, the prisoners in San Ramon were hastily released and the buildings destroyed. So, na-destroyed ang mostly sa mga buildings in San Ramon Prison. In 1907, the American administration reestablished the prison farm. So, after the Americans took over, they established the prison farm. So, they restored the prison farm. After several years, the colony became practically self-supporting. So because of their uh, programs, they are self-sufficient prison with 75,000 coconut trees, which were planted at the beginning of General Pershing's administration. So because they have large land, and San Ramon Prison is an agricultural industry. I mean agricultural prison. They are self-sufficient na. So in 1995, Congresswoman Maria Clara Lobregat proposed the transfer of San Ramon Prison to Bongay Town in the mountainous area of Zamboanga to give way to a special economic zone. So they have transferred to another area para sa economic zone. So Iwahig Penal Colony. So Iwahig Prison and Penal Farm is one of the most popular prisons in the Philippines. So it was established in 1902 by the United States for the Filipino prisoners. So kaning Iwahig is na-establish siya sa under na sa Americans. This is for the Filipino prisoners who had fought with the American during their colonization in the Philippines. So the inmates tend vast farms. So dagko kaayo ang mga lands dire. So instead of ideally spending time behind bars, so instead of spending their time in the prison, they are to tend the farms so they can earn money and be a self-sufficient prison. The more enterprising earn by making handicrafts and other productive activities during their spare time. So they are they have productive activities while in prison. So they also created handicrafts. So there's someone I know who also do this in the inside prison. So they are for example, in Christmas time, they are making paroles and other stuff, and they would sell it outside the prison, then they could earn money. So a specific area of Princesa was selected as the site for a correctional facility. So the American military carved out a prison facility in the rainforest of Puerto Princesa. So the institution had for its first superintendent, so this is Lieutenant George Wolfe, a member of the U.S. Expeditionary Force, who later became the first prisons director. So he became the first prison director of the institutional correction. So Governor Luke Wright authorized the establishment of a penal colony in the province of Palawan in November 16, 1904. So this penal settlement, which originally comprised an area of 22 acres, originally served as a depository for prisoners who could not be accommodated at the Bilibid prison in Manila. So since there's a lot of convicted criminals in Bilibid prison, then these persons will be in the settlement of the penal settlement. So a merit system was devised for the prisoners and vocational activities were offered. So there's a lot of activities in the prisons they offered. So this includes farming, fishing, forestry, carpentry, and hospital paramedical work. So prisoners could choose the vocational activities they wanted. So kung maayo kag farming, then you can choose farming as your vocational activity. Or if you are good with fishing, then you're gonna be fishing. So prisoners in Iwahig were divided into two groups, the settlers and the colonies. So settlers are those engaged in farming for their own benefit. So they farm to earn money also. They are the ones whose applications for land to cultivate have been approved. So Iwag is subdivided into 4 zones or districts. So central subcolony with an area of 14,700 hectares, Santa Lucia with 9,685 hectares, and Montible with 18,000 hectares, and Inagawan with 13,000 hectares. So the biggest central the biggest subcolony is the central subcolony. So Correctional Institute for Women. So Correctional Institute for Women, for short for CIW. So it is located in Mandaluyong City, the country's first and only penal institution dedicated to women offenders. So this is the first and only penal institute. On February 14, 1931, the women prisoners were transferred from the old Bilibid prison to the building especially constructed for them. So from still old Bilibid prison, so they are transferred. Some of these are transferred in the CIW. So its old name, Women's Prison, was changed to Correctional Institution for Women. So CIW, according to a Senate report, occupied 18 hectares. So the original structure was a one-story building which housed the office, the brigades, mess hall, kitchen, chapel, infirmary, bathrooms, and employees' restrooms. So the prisoners' vocational activities were expanded to include poultry and piggery, as well as cultivation of crops, flowers, and fruits. So usually, CIW also offered vocational activities such as sewing, handicrafts. So during the Japanese occupation, the CIW, despite a drastic reduction in the numbers of its employees, continued with its work. So still nagwork ra gyapon ang CIW even though they are occupied by the Japanese force. So a number of female military prisoners were also confined in the institution. So weekly KGSM classes were introduced. A dental clinic was built. So nagka-daghan ang ilang facilities inside the uh, institutional correction. So local telephones were installed in the guards' quarters. So the prison uh, is upgraded as the time passed by. So as you can see in the picture, there are they are sewing, performing their vocational activities. So the Bureau of Public Works made major repairs on the main building, and a workshop and infirmary were constructed for the inmates' use. Then in 2000, a new four-story building was constructed by the Department of Public Works within the grounds of CIW. So it is the growing congestion in the facility. So since nagkadaghan ang mga piniriso, so they have constructed a four-story to decongest the facility. Davao Penal Colony. So Davao Penal Colony is the first penal settlement founded and organized under Filipino administration. So after na namahawa ang mga Americans. So the settlement, which originally had an area of approximately 30,000 hectares in the districts of Panabo and Tagum, so Davao del Norte, which formally established on January 21, 1932 by the virtue of Act number 3732. So Area 18 Philippine Davao Penal Colony, May 28, 1939. So this is the look of Davao Penal Colony before. So it also granted authority to the Secretary of Justice to establish a new prison and penal colony in a suitable public land. So a budget of 500,000 was allocated. So Governor Dwight Davis signed the proclamation number 414 on October 7, 1931, which reserved a site for the penal colony in Davao Province in Mindanao. So the site offered ideal conditions for agricultural activities. So they are also planning to follow the format of other penal or penal farm prisons. So during World War II, the colony was converted into concentration camp where more than 1,000 Japanese internees were committed by the Philippine American Armed Forces. So on December 20, 1941, the Japanese Imperial Forces attacked Davao, and the colony was among the establishments taken over by the invading army. So naapo ni damage ning ilahong institution because of the attack of the Japanese. The entire settlement was thrown into confusion and a great number of prisoners escaped. So, naka-escape ang mga prisoners in the institution because of the attack of Japanese forces. So the remaining colony employees, their families, and the inmates were evacuated the Iwahig, where they organized the Davao Penal Colony at Inagawan Sub-Colony. So after the liberation of the Philippines, the colony in exile in Palawan returned to its old site in Davao. So nibalik sila after the liberation of the Philippines. Sablayan Penal Farm. So established on September 26, 1954 by virtue of Presidential Proclamation number 72. So that the penal colony has a total land area of approximately 16,190 hectares. So prison records shows that the first colonies and employees arrived in Sablayan on January 15, 1955. Since then, several buildings have been constructed, including the colony's dormitories, employees' quarters, guardhouse, and a schoolhouse, chapel, recreation hall, and post exchange. So there are 3 sub-colonies were later organized. So one is a reservation, which this day remains part of a protected rainforest. So another is in the coastal area. The third was used by the national government as a relocation site for refugees from the eruption of Mount Pinatubo in 1991. So Leyte Regional Prison. So this is the last institutional correction, which is Leyte Regional Prison. So it is situated in Abuyog, Southern Leyte, and was established a year after the declaration of martial law in 1972 by virtue of Presidential Decree number 28. So declaration of martial law is by former President Ferdinand E. Marcos. So while its plantilla and institutional plan were almost ideal, so lack of funds made the prison unable to realize its full potential. So because of they have a nice plan for the to be an ideal Leyte regional prison, but because of the lack of funds, they were unable to be a full to have a full potential prison system, and its facilities are often below par compared with those of other established penal farms. So lack of funds lang ang ilang kulang. So the LRP has an inmate capacity of 500. So it is a small prison because their capacity only are 500. It follows the same agricultural format. So provincial jail system. So Office of the Provincial Jail. So provincial jail system was first established in 1910 under the American regime, supervised and controlled by the provincial government and headed by the provincial jail warden. So their mission is the office of the provincial warden shall promote safe and total detainment and rehabilitation or restoration of detainees under its custody. So ang ilang mission is to rehabilitate or restore the detainees under their custody. So vision, an institution managed by God-centered professionals and trained personnel to serve as the principal catalyst for rehabilitation. So that leads to reformation. So rehabilitation to reform the detainees of the social, physical, and spiritual aspects of persons being detained to develop as law-abiding citizens. So ila i-rehabilitate ang mga individuals to be a law-abiding citizens for eventual reintegration into the mainstream of society. So goals and objectives of the provincial jail system. So office of the provincial warden is committed to carry out effective implementation of all programs, projects, and activities relating to jail detainment and rehabilitation of prisoners being sentenced and detained or held for trial by the court of justice. So to develop and attend to the welfare of detainees in the provincial jail by providing subsistence and other welfare benefits and through provisions of jail decongestion programs. So they will attend the needs of the welfare of the detainees. So provide protection services and prepare the inmates socially. So protection services is to protect the inmates socially, physically, mentally, and spiritually uh, from other inmates that will have ill-minded na kanang ilang pasakitan pud ilang co-inmates sa prison. So to become productive citizens for their eventual reintegration into the mainstream of society upon pardon or release. So after sila ma-priso, kanang na-rehabilitate na sila, they are ready to reintegrate to the mainstream of society after. So Public Attorney's Office or PAO. So Public Attorney's Office is attached agency of the Department of Justice. So PAO shall be an independent and autonomous office but attached to the Department of Justice for the purposes of policy and program coordination. So PAO provides indigent litigants free legal assistance. So the PAO shall be the principal law office of the government in extending free legal assistance to indigent persons in criminal, civil, labor, administrative, and other quasi-judicial cases. So the powers and functions of the PAO shall independently discharge its mandates. Its mandate to render free of charge legal representation, assistance, and counseling to indigent persons in criminal, civil, labor, administrative, and other quasi-judicial cases. So in the exigency of the service, the PAO may be called upon by proper government authorities to render such service to other persons, so subject to existing laws, rules, and regulations. So if you are under uh, uh, sa korte, if you cannot afford a attorney, then the public attorney's office shall provide. So free ra ni siya, free of charge. So their mission is the public attorney's office exists to provide the indigent litigants, the oppressed, the marginalized and underprivileged. So mga underprivileged kanang dili sila walay mga kanang dili kayo sila ka-provide og mga sila ka-hire og mga attorney to defend themselves sa korte. So underprivileged members of the society, so free access to courts. So judicial and quasi-judicial agencies, by rendering legal services, counseling, and assistance in consonance with the constitutional mandate that free access to courts shall not be denied to any person by reason of poverty. So, ipobre ka, nya, dili marason nga dili nimo dili siya marason nga wala kay attorney. So, ang government mo provide o attorney para nimo. So, dili rason ang kahirapan. So in order to ensure the rule of law, so rule of law is kanang naagyud mo defend nimo ba sa if daan na sa korte. So law man na siya, so tumanon gyud sa so truth and social justice as components of the country's sustainable development. So their vision is a government agency that is God-centered and dynamic bureaucracy that is responsive to the ever-growing legal needs of the indigents and oppressed, led by highly competent, world-class, development-oriented, honest and dedicated and nationalistic leaders and lawyers. So that's all. Thank you for listening.